Welcome back to the Music Cities. I'm Kevin Crowder, and today's episode is the economic power of music tribes, from deadheads to economic development. So today we're going to dive into this powerful but underestimated economic force, music tribes. So a couple of years ago, one of my team members gave me Seth Godin's book, Tribes, for Christmas. Godin uses the deadheads as a prime example of how authentic communities form around shared beliefs and values, not just products and services. A tribe is a group of people connected to one another, connected to a leader, and connected to an idea, a concept. For millions of years, human beings have been part of one tribe or another. And a group only needs two things to be a tribe: a shared interest and a way to communicate. So in his book, he uses the deadheads as a prime example of that sort of authentic community. So when I sent our year-end Business Flare wrap-up out to the team, I jokingly referred to them as flareheads, having just read Seth's book. They immediately adopted it, and they still use the term today. And a flarehead is not just our team and our team members. We have clients who consider themselves flareheads. We have peers and frequent collaborators that consider themselves as flareheads. It really has evolved into this community that all gets it the way that we get it. That has that certain irreverent attitude, or that humor, and just everything about our approach that makes us unique, that makes us a purple cow in economic development. And so what started off as a joke became a real tribal identity for us because it represented something authentic about what Business Flare stands for. And then I realized, if you want to understand how to create sustainable economic development, study music tribes. They are the absolute gold standard of authentic community building that drives real economic value. Just look at the economic empires that some of these musicians who have become music brands and institutions have built. So today we're going to look at 4 of the most powerful music tribes in history. And what do they teach us about creating places people want to be? So we're going to start with something important, and when I do take this concept of tribes, I take it a little stricter or a little further than Seth does in here, because he sees a very broad application of tribes. But here I'm looking really specifically for certain things that aren't present in all bands or artists, let's say. From the perspective I'm looking at it, not every passionate fan base is a tribe. I'm a huge Iron Maiden fan. Favorite band. They have been for a long time. They're my inspiration as a guitarist. They're what kept me playing guitar and not giving it up in 1983 after trying to learn for 2 years. They have millions of fans worldwide. They travel internationally for concerts. But when I'm there, yes, in Seth's definition, that would be a tribe. Metalheads, I mean, just the term. That is a tribe. It is our tribe. But from a branding perspective, that's relatable to cities, I'm looking for something deeper. And what I don't see there is that same tribal culture as someone like the Grateful Dead had. And this distinction matters because the tribes create the sustainable economic value that maybe regular fandoms can't replicate. And so what is that difference, at least to us? Again, taking it a little further than Seth takes it. Fans love the music, fans attend shows, fans buy the merch. Fans know the lyrics, they know everything, but tribes create this real shared identity and a language that's unique to their community. They have these economic ecosystems, and they extend far beyond the music sales and the merch sales. And there are these lifelong and generational relationships that are built around that tribal identity. Specific gatherings of tribal members internationally without the artist being present. Content creation and sharing that amplifies the movement globally, not just the music. And there's economic activity just abounds in every city where they gather. And so according to Godin, these successful tribes need 5 elements: a shared interest, a way to communicate, the first 2 we mentioned. They need a leader who champions the cause, doesn't have to be the headline artist. A movement worth joining, and platforms for members to connect with each other. Music tribes, it's the perfect intersection of all of these elements. It's finding the perfect balance uniquely of those elements. It's demonstrating how that authentic community building drives economic impact. And it's something that traditional market analysis is going to consistently underestimate. It's the same way that supply and demand and gap analysis underestimates or does not acknowledge the potential of the entrepreneur. These music tribes are always underestimated, or this tribal concept is always underestimated, because when you're doing analysis, you're looking at what exists, you're looking at existing conditions, you're looking at trends that are historical and how you got to a place that you don't want to be anymore. But if we look at something else that Seth tells us in the book that I think is relevant, he tells us that we have the leverage to make things happen and the desire to work in what we believe in, but we still get stuck, and we get stuck following archaic rules, stuck in industries that not only avoid change but fight it. The status quo is something hard to overcome because there's a lot of people benefiting from the status quo. They're stuck in fear of what their boss will say, what their audience will say, of what, stuck because we're afraid we're going to get into trouble. And most importantly, we get stuck acting like managers or employees instead of the leaders we could become. We're embracing a factory, not a tribe. And so then where this comes in, and this concept becomes especially important, is about leadership, which he defines as creating change that you believe in. And then he says, here's a new rule. If you want to grow, if you want to grow, you need to find customers who are willing to join you or believe in you or donate to you or support you. And guess what? The only customers willing to do that are looking for something new. The growth comes from change and light and noise. So they're looking for something new, which means you're not going to find that in a market analysis. You're not going to get that out of a focus group. They're looking for something new, but they don't necessarily know what it is, but they will know it when you see it. You create for yourself, as we talked about in the last episode, and that's what people are going to connect with, that authenticity. Again, one of those 5 elements, maybe the most important one, is a movement worth joining. So for economic developers, this matters because tribes show us the places that it shows us how places can create that passionate devotion. And that's through authentic or genuine identity and not through generic amenities or creating something artificially for the audience, like Rick Rubin described movie making. So those rare music artists achieve that tribal status. They don't just have fans. They create these traveling economies that are worth hundreds of millions of dollars, maybe some even approaching the billions. So we're going to start off with what I think is the original blueprint of the music tribes, which are the Deadheads. Again, I don't see the Beatles as a tribe, not in my definition. Huge fan base, huge market, huge marketing, huge brand. But the Deadheads are the original blueprint. They created it. And that impact still influences and resonates today in how we think about how community-driven economics works. The Deadheads, they didn't just attend the concerts. They followed the band on the road, and they followed for decades. And they followed as Jerry died, the fan base didn't die out. They generated hundreds of millions of dollars in economic impact around the country, even around the world. They built these communities. They started businesses. They created this economic activity in every city they visited. When the Deadheads came to town, it wasn't just a concert. It was an economic event. It wasn't specifically a music festival, but it was this economic. It was a city unto itself. It was great placemaking itself. The thing that connects people to place is that opportunity to engage with one another and being open and welcoming. That's what we're talking about here. And what made them a tribe instead of fans is they had their own language. They created their own economy. I mean, trading bootleg recordings amongst themselves and handmade crafts and organic food. There was this own economy within the Deadhead universe at these events. There's lifelong friendships based on that tribal identity, not demographics. People who would have never met each other, or maybe never have thought to have anything to do with each other if they did meet, became lifelong friends through this. And like I said, Jerry Garcia died in 1995. It's 30 years, and that tribal devotion has not waned. And so the economic lesson with the Deadheads is that authentic community building provides that sustainable value, and it will outlast any individual, any product, or any performance. So cities This is what happens when you create that genuine devotion around your authentic identity. There are places that people are just connected to so strongly, they feel so passionate about. You can see it in those places. We go a lot and see a lot of jam bands, and there is a jam band tribe sort of around there, but what you see overwhelmingly, even when you're at a music festival that was the Allman Brothers and Widespread Panic and Government Mule, all around you see Deadhead identity, merch. It still is dominant in that venue. So for economic developers, the Deadhead model, what it does is it reveals how authentic tribal identity can create that economic value. That your shared entertainment or your generic entertainment districts, they're never going to achieve that. You know, they built this traveling economy around those shared values, and it's things that cities should aspire to create or let be created. More importantly, you as a city, you are not going to create that ever. You have to allow it to be created, and you have to recognize when it's happening and grab that lightning in a bottle moment. The next tribe that we look at in our big four are the parrot heads and the ultimate place brand. And we're going to actually dig deeper into this in our next episode, in episode 3. But Jimmy Buffett's parrot heads, of which I was one for a very long time. It's why I moved to Florida. I became one traveling around Central and South America when I was stationed down there. But the parrot heads represent something that's even more remarkable than the deadheads. They turn that tribal devotion into one of the most powerful brands on the planet. Jimmy Buffett didn't just create a tribe. He created Margaritaville, a place that people desperately wanted to visit, desperately wanted to live, a place that changed the course of people's lives, like me moving to Florida, even though Margaritaville was not his song that did it. It was a different song. But everybody wanted to be there, even though it only existed in a song. It demonstrates perfectly my core definition of economic development being creating places people want to be. And what he did with Margaritaville is why I think of him and call him the best economic developer in the history of the world. It's a fake place. It's not a real place. And more people want to be there than want to be in your city or my city. Now, he ultimately turned it into this huge entrepreneurial venture or ventures. But before any physical Margaritaville properties existed, millions wanted to be there already. The song created, such a compelling vision of a place. It was a lifestyle, it was a feeling, it was an escape. And people just emotionally connected to it and craved it. They proved that place branding can be so powerful, it creates economic value, just even when that place isn't real. Today, that brand is over $1 billion in value. Resorts, restaurant franchise, retirement communities now, entertainment venues, all based on a place that started in one man's imagination. So the ultimate economic development lesson here is that authentic place branding creates desire before infrastructure does. Think about it. Oftentimes we see neighborhoods get hot. It's the artists that move in. They create that desire. And it's often in a place the city has neglected. And that emotional connection comes first. The physical developments follow because people already wanted to be there. Cities struggle branding authentic assets, while Buffett, created all this value from a fictional location because he hit the storytelling. It's authentic storytelling and compelling vision. Again, come back to our gut sandwich. We can talk about data and we can talk about all the logical reasons you want to be in a place. Tell the stories of the place. Tell people why they should want to be there and tell them in your voice. The parrot heads became, they were evangelists for this lifestyle and for this place. And that momentum that this tribe brought was so strong. They brought this place, this fictional place that they wanted to be, into physical existence through that tribal devotion. Next, we go to Taylor Swift Swifties, which I didn't know much about until I started digging in to really learn about the tribal aspect of Taylor. And it really shows how that tribal power translates in the modern economy. I mean, her last tour generated $5 billion in economic impact across all of those cities. Fans were traveling internationally. They spent thousands beyond ticket cost. I remember getting stuck with a flight delay in, I want to say, Charlotte. And they're waiting for the same plane I was trying to get on back to Miami. Was a colleague and her daughter who were on their way back from, I believe, Italy and the Taylor Swift concert. Now, that economic activity itself, does it make it a tribe? Yeah, probably. But what really does it is the Swifties have their own language, their own economic activities, and their own customs. They decode hidden meanings in the lyrics, and they have these elaborate friendship bracelets and exchanging and trading of those. And they have, again, that shared devotion that's built around this community that's far outside of the music. That it goes beyond traditional entertainment analysis. I mean, your economic impact, when the concert gets announced in a location, the hotels get booked up months in advance. The restaurants are extending their hours that they operate. Sometimes local businesses create these themed offerings, and you'll see the hospitality industry mobilize around it. And she's got management that is brilliant. She creates these insider experiences that just strengthen that momentum and that connection amongst the tribe. When she releases an album, it's a community event. They don't just consume her music; they participate in creating the entire experience and atmosphere of the tribe. And so, for economic developers, the Swifties prove that the tribal economics work at an unprecedented economic scale, especially in the digital age. Cities, if you can understand how to attract and serve those sorts of gatherings, it can generate massive economic impact. And again, your traditional analysis is going to miss that. So you really have to embed yourself, and you have to find the people that understand this tribe and look for those opportunities, because it can give you an opportunity to build something that might be sustainable year round, not just when she comes to town. The fourth one we're going to talk about today is the one that I just recently experienced that was sort of my motivation for recreating and repositioning the podcast to focus on that convergence of hidden economic development within music. And that is the baby metalverse and innovation tribes. The baby metalverse represents something just absolutely unique. It's a tribe built around innovation and this authentic fusion that just shouldn't work, but it absolutely does. And we're going to spend our fourth episode on innovation and entrepreneurship lessons from baby metal. And so when I attended their Las Vegas concert last month, I witnessed thousands of fans, everything from teenage girls to grizzled metalheads in their 60s, singing along to kawaii metal. Kawaii is cute in Japanese, by the way. Everyone's singing along to it in perfect unison, lyrics, half of which are in Japanese. The tribal devotion that you saw was obvious. What struck me was this tribe formed. What it essentially does is it celebrates the impossible. Baby metal fans aren't just devoted to the music. They're devoted to this principle of authentic innovation that's created this incredible value. It celebrates breaking boundaries and refusing categories and proving critics wrong. They travel internationally, not just for concerts, but to be part of a community that validates their belief in creative risk-taking. I mean, I flew to Las Vegas Saturday night, went to the concert on Sunday, and went straight to the airport to get on a red-eye back to Miami for their concert. It goes beyond economic activity that they create in the band itself. Baby Metalverse members, the tribe, create their own content and buy merchandise, generate economic impact, again, far beyond typical music consumption. They're the evangelists for the innovation itself. I'm an evangelist for the innovation. You're going to see that in the next episode. It's one of the most amazing economic development and entrepreneurship things I've ever witnessed. The economic development lesson with them is that some tribes form around products and places, but the most powerful ones is going to be around principles and values. And Baby Metal created this tribe that celebrates that authentic innovation. The type of, it's authentic innovation, but it's absolutely fearless, and it does not apologize. And those are the most important lessons out of anything we can talk about here for cities. And we're talking about here the kind of community cities should want to attract and nurture, and the lessons that come out of this experience for entrepreneurs and for cities are some of the best that I've ever seen. So overall, when we think about tribes, both the ones we talked about here as well as other tribes, just thinking about the concept that Seth Godin brought us in his book, what does it teach us about creating this sustainable economic development? And so first, the tribes are going to form around this authentic identity. It's not going to form around manufactured marketing. And that's one of the things that makes baby metal especially interesting, as well as the Swifties, because we are in more of a day of manufactured marketing and pop, K-pop and J-pop and some inauthentic things, and they buck the trend. And all of these big four that I identified, they all represent these genuine cultural movements. They're not based on focus group testing campaign. They come from the gut or from the heart. So, the lesson there is as a city, don't try to manufacture authentic tribal identity, because you're going to fail. It can't be faked. Then, tribal economics generate these massive multiplier impacts that traditional analysis is going to miss. They create economic activities in hotels and restaurants and local businesses, but then they have these secondary markets that extend far beyond that. Their own economic systems, their own bartering and trading, their own additional ripple effects of content creation. So cities that understand this part of the economics, you position yourself as gathering places for these communities, and that can generate sustained economic impact. Third, the tribes create this competitive advantages that are sustainable because it's authentic differentiation. Each of these four tribes we talked about owns their category completely. There's no other artist that can legitimately replicate what makes those special. You can't compete with the Deadheads. You can't occupy that subgenre. Nobody else can. You can't occupy that subgenre that Jimmy Buffett created. You can't fill that space. You can't compete there. You can't do that with Taylor Swift. And kawaii metal, baby metal owns that subgenre 100%. There's been other Japanese metal and girl metal come, but it's very different. It's not in that space. And so cities, if you can create that sort of devotion around your authenticity and your authentic assets, you start finding your way that you as a destination become unreplicable. And there's great examples, and there's cities out there that have done that. And then, fourth, the connections between the members, and not just the members and the leaders. When we talk about creating a place people want to be as the definition of economic development, the things that create that help create a place people want to be are the aesthetics of the place, the social offerings and activities and opportunities for people to engage with one another, and how open and welcoming that community is. Well, that's what you see with the tribes. It's not just between the members and the leaders. It's this interconnectivity between everything in this ecosystem, this community they create. The Deadheads traded bootleg recordings freely. The Parrot Heads gather at local clubs. They've got clubs all over the country, and they have gatherings independent of the band or Jimmy. Swifties exchange their friendship bracelets, and the Baby Metaverse creates this global content together. So cities, you can create these community, or you can create these community platforms where your community can connect and gather around, their shared values and their shared interests. And then finally, that tribal leadership, it's facilitating community building, not just managing. One thing that Seth Godin emphasizes is that tribal leaders, you do not control your tribes. You serve your tribes by creating opportunities for this deeper connection. You're the leader of it, but it's because of that connection people have to you and to your concept, or to that concept that you have shared in your shared experiences. You're not connecting to you. You're not a tribe because you are, dominating. It's very different. So from a business perspective, successful economic development, how do you create that tribal devotion? Well, you have to preserve your authentic local identity and culture, and find and preserve that thing that differentiates you, that thing that is remarkable and can't be replicated, your unfair advantage. You have to enhance your community building platforms, your gathering spaces, your ways that you amplify that tribal connection amongst your tribe. Expose the hidden demand for those authentic experiences, those things that mainstream tourism and mainstream traditional analysis miss. Tell those stories, expose that opportunity. Invest in your tribal infrastructure, whatever that's going to be. It could be venues or events. It can be platforms that serve passionate communities. Whatever's that infrastructure that's going to help support and help that tribe facilitate that tribe's growth, invest in that, and capitalize again on that purple cow, on that unfair advantage. Capitalize on being the only place that offers that certain authentic experience that the tribe is based on, something that can't be replicated. So, to kind of wrap up, again, you're going to hear us talk about two of these tribes, the Parrot Heads and the Baby Metaverse, in the next couple of episodes. But, these music tribes, they show us what's possible when authentic community building meets economic development. That's what's happening here. They are authentic communities, and it's commerce done a different way. They prove that the most sustainable economic strategies they create this passionate devotion. It's not passive consumption. So another lesson for economic developers is stop trying to attract generic visitors with generic amenities, and let's just enjoy your race to the bottom. Instead, identify your authentic tribal potential. Create gathering spaces for communities that have that shared vision, those shared values. So whether you're the Deadheads in that countercultural exploration, the Parrot Heads escapist lifestyle, the Swifties are a community celebration, and the Baby Metaverse is an embrace of innovation. These tribes, the successful ones, are going to form around these shared beliefs and experiences that people want to genuinely be part of. So as I mentioned, in the next episode, we're going to dive deep into the Jimmy Buffett example and how he created that ultimate demonstration of creating a place people want to be, even only in the imagination. So until then, what tribe is your community built to serve? What tribe is already out there that maybe you from the ivory tower of City Hall are missing? Maybe since so many city employees and city managers don't live in a community, they don't spend enough time there to know what tribe is present. The best economic development is not about attracting business. It's creating those tribes, because from there, everything else is going to flow. So anyway, this is the Music Cities Podcast. I'm Kevin Crowder. Visit themusiccities.com for more insights on authentic economic development, converging with music and the lessons that come from music. And remember, if you're not creating that tribal devotion, you're probably just creating generic results. So until next time, rock on.